Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Nic Cage Fight Podcast, where occasionally we watch a film that takes us back in time and shows us what it was like to be a smooth jazz cat in the crime-riddled streets of Harlem in the early 1930s, late 1920s. I'm one of your hosts, Josh, joined as always by Rich and Ryan. How are you cats feeling tonight?
I'm coalescing the vapors of Nic Cage's filmography into a meaningful and understandable comprehension. In other words, I'm a bullshit artist.
I'm doing really good because this movie was right in my Q zone.
There you go. You're not bullshitting me? It's not right in your Q zone, is it?
Listen, the only thing that this movie was missing, and it almost had one, was a heist. If this movie had like a movie-long heist, I would never watch another movie again. I would watch this.
They could have fucking put that in too. Like they're trying to get the cash box from the Cotton Club, and Cage is the one setting the heist up. That would have been sick as hell.
Look, I mean, it had gangsters, it had gambling. It was set in the 1920s. It had people who I knew about. It had a young Richard Gere.
It had a killer soundtrack.
It had a killer soundtrack. All it needed was a heist, and I would stop doing this podcast because we found the movie.
Gangsters, gambling, and glamour. That's what you're into.
Yeah, absolutely.
3 Gs. Yeah,
Did you say it hit the G spot?
Yes.
Q zone, G spot. We're going to hit the entire alphabet by the end of this episode. We're here today to talk about The Cotton Club, a 1984 film that's rated R. And the cut I watched ran a cool 2 hours and 9 minutes.
And the cut we watched was 2 hours, 19 minutes, if I'm not mistaken.
There you go.
With some minor differences thrown in. So there might be a little bit of confusion.
That's okay. We'll work it out.
But that's okay. For me, this movie was more about an overall vibe, not really a scene by scene.
It's a good vibes movie. Totally.
This is a great vibes movie.
I agree with that. But let's dive into housekeeping so we can get into all the shit we want to talk about. So first up, we got our director, Francis Ford Coppola. You know him very likely, especially if you've listened to any of our back catalog. But he's directed such films as Apocalypse Now, The Conversation, which, if I'm remembering correctly, is Ryan's pick for his strongest entry as a director.
Probably The Godfather Part 2, but The Conversation is the one that I will always come back to because it is phenomenal and not enough people have seen it. So I always have to give it its due and try and get more people to catch that film.
It's your Coppola dark horse film.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, gotcha. As Ryan mentioned, we got the Godfather movies, and I always like to throw in Bram Stoker's Dracula when I can.
That's a movie I love and hate in equal measure because I think the acting and the writing is really bad, but all of the special effects are so cool. I can't help but love it.
It's a classic, no matter how you slice it.
And I have a little piece of very little known trivia on Francis Ford Coppola. Did you know that he's Nic Cage's uncle?
I didn't.
I had not heard that before.
Okay.
That's news to me.
Okay. I feel like I made that joke after every Coppola. Well, luckily, this is the last one. I think this is the 3 Coppolas.
Yeah.
Oh, we're rounding out the Coppolas.
Yeah, we're closing the book on the Coppola movies with this.
Interesting. I'm a little disappointed. The Coppola films were good.
They were, yes. Resoundingly good compared to last week's entry.
They really were.
I mean, just compared to a general movie, they were all really good. I mean,
there's a reason why Coppola was lumped in with like Spielberg and George Lucas as like the new face of Hollywood, and like Robert Altman and all those dudes.
Oh, he's so much better than both of those directors too.
They're definitely better than Lucas. I don't know. I think he's right on the same plane as Spielberg's best.
I'm not a big Spielberg person, but I'm also not a big fan of like those kinds of like big budget, like big Hollywood movies. Which he does really well. Like, I'm not here to say that, like...
He does smaller stuff really well, too. He directed a few episodes of Columbo that are excellent.
I'll have to check those out. Because when I think of Spielberg, I just think of, like, the Indiana Joneses, which are all good. They're all good. I think of E.T., which I personally didn't enjoy that much.
E.T. is a wretched little creature. I hate him.
I think of like E.T. to death with hammers. I can tell you that much.
I think of Jurassic Park, which like was really good, but just kind of not quite there for me. I think
Jurassic Park still holds up.
I would have
That
preferred to
I gotta
see
push
some
back
more
on.
people being eaten by dinosaurs.
A
And
guy gets
also,
eaten off a toilet.
Yes, it rules.
also
Fucking
I
Newman
think
from Seinfeld gets spit in the face.
yeah. Also, I think the new Jurassic Parks kind of tainted the old ones for me a bit.
Yeah, no, I agree with that entirely. The old one holds up. I don't know when the last time you saw it was. If
Probably
you
about
watch
a
it
year,
today,
so I'll watch it again.
yeah. If you watch it today, you'll be like, God damn, it's amazing.
All right.
So on to the writers. First up, just to get it out of the way, Francis Ford Coppola worked on the screenplay as well. He also wrote Apocalypse Now, The Conversation, the Great Gatsby, Patton, just throw out some of his writing credits. We have William Kennedy, who I'm not overly familiar with, but he worked on this screenplay as well as Ironweed, the novel, and the screenplay when it was adapted. Not overly familiar with this individual, but very short CV here. And then we have Mario Puzo, who did The Godfathers and Superman 1 and 2.
Well, and
I
so
didn't know that.
now
That's
just a
fucking
little
weird.
a little piece of like actual trivia here. So Puzo wrote the original script. William Kennedy and Coppola came in to rewrite that script.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so like Puzo was like kind of fired. This is when they were going to have Robert Evans, not the podcaster, but the guy who helped do The Godfather. He was going to direct this, and apparently the original script was kind of a mess because
I believe it has someone who has read the Godfather novel, the first one.
right, like that
Mario
book's...
Puzo has some of the worst impulses as a writer.
Well, yeah, because he just gives into all of them, and that's why you had a 3.5 hour long movie that nobody thought was going to do well.
Yeah.
In The Godfather.
And that's after they cut on all the weird shit about that girl with the giant vagina. Yeah, that's a part of The Godfather. That's a
Yes,
major
it is.
plot point.
It sure is.
On to the cast. So I can tell you outright that this part of housekeeping is not going to live up to the amount of star power that they packed into this film. But we're going to do our best without having an entirely housekeeping episode. So first up, as always, Nic Cage as Vincent Dwyer. Next up,
real guy. That is a real... I'm just going to say which one of these people are real and which ones are made up.
Next up,
sorry. I'm so sorry. I keep stepping on your toes. Vincent Dwyer was based on a real guy named Vincent Cole, who was an Irish hitman. So sort of a real guy. The way that he dies in this movie is the real death.
Oh, well, that's intriguing. Also, spoilers, but
this movie's 40 years old. People can deal with it.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Richard Gere as Dixie Dwyer. Richard Gere, relatively recognizable actor, but he was in Officer and a Gentleman, Primal Fear, which is one of my favorites, Chicago, Pretty Woman.
One of my favorites.
The Jackal.
Fake guy, by the way.
Dixie Dwyer, you mean, not Richard Gere.
Yes. Dixie Dwyer is made up.
Yeah, I also really like Primal Fear. That movie's great.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Gregory Hines as Sandman Williams. Gregory Hines was in History of the World Part 1, Wolfen, as always. We got to shout these out. Muppets Take Manhattan. And he voices the dad in Little Bill.
Fake guy, but was based, from what I can tell, not on any one person or group of people, just based on like just the talented kind of tap dancers that they would have at the Cotton Club. And there were a lot of like racial animosities in there as well. So that's just who they decided to write to tell that story.
It was a good pick. I liked his character. Next up, we have Diane Lane as Vera Cicero. Diane Lane, yet another appearance on the pod. She was in Rumblefish. She was also in The Outsiders. She's in the DC universe as Martha Kent. She was in Judge Dredd and also Streetcar Named Desire.
I got one I'll shout out for her because I really like it. And I don't think this movie got its due. Hollywoodland, which is about the death of George Reeves, Christopher Reeve's dad, and the original screen Superman. She plays Tony Mannix, Eddie Mannix's wife, he was like a studio fixer, like a studio sanctioned mob guy who would cuff actors who were like misbehaving on the ears and shit.
Interesting.
Really fascinating life on
Nice.
that dude. And he's played by Bob Hoskins in that. So that's another little crossover.
Love a crossover.
Also,
fake character, but I'm sure based on somebody. Italian men tend to have Gumars, you know.
Fortuitous timing on the mention of Bob Hoskins. He's next up, playing Oni Madden. Bob Hoskins, of course, super famous for his roles in Super Mario Brothers.
I'm glad
I was about
you led
to
with
say,
that.
if you didn't lead with that,
yeah, come on. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? And apparently, he played King Lear at least one point.
At least one, yeah. He's also in a movie called Mona Lisa that I love to death.
There you go.
based on a real guy who this story was actually very faithful to him. Actually, not based on, like, they gave him the same name, I believe. Yeah, they did. So it's actually based on somebody real, and how the story plays out is almost exactly how it happened in real life. The only thing you don't see is after he gets arrested, he retires down to Arkansas, which was apparently a huge place for mobsters to go retire.
Huh.
Very interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, that was like the mobsters' retirement plan. They would make their money until they went to jail, and then when they got out of jail, they would all go to like this town in Arkansas.
Next up, we have Lawrence Fishburne as Bumpy Rhodes. Lawrence Fishburne, of course, famous for a lot of reasons: the Matrix films, the John Wick films, Contagion, Mystic River, and many other movies starring Lawrence Fishburne.
Based on not based on anybody, fake character. Wish he was real.
Yeah,
Also,
he was cool as hell in this.
I had put this on Twitter, but remember like a month or two ago, there was this big Twitter discourse about who was hotter, a young Al Pacino or a young Robert De Niro.
I do. It's because they both got their like 40-year younger than them girlfriend's pregnant.
So fuck all that. Young Lawrence Fishburne, aka Larry Fishburne, is a fucking smoke show.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that dude is attractive.
Also, Rich, I'd meant to ask you, I was surprised with the "this guy didn't exist" thing, because I thought all of my knowledge of real life gangsters is taken from television and film. So I thought it might have been the Bumpy from American Gangster.
No, and also so American Gangster, its timeline is a little, I don't want to say confusing because they try to kind of keep it, but like I feel like the way that it was directed, it makes it feel earlier than it was. Like a lot of the not a lot of cinematography, but a lot of the things that they use makes it feel like it should be in like the 30s, and it's not. It's in the 70s.
But yeah, but that would have put Bumpy at like 70 or 80 if it was the same type of character.
Yeah, I guess.
And he died of like a heart attack or a stroke or something. So I was like, oh, maybe.
No, it's not though.
Okay, well, there you go. Next up on my list, we have Tom Waits. Love Tom Waits. His character's name is Irving Stark. It does not come up in the film, so far as I can tell. But Tom Waits has been in such films as Seven Psychopaths, Ballad of Buster Scruggs, Rumblefish, The Book of Eli, and just generally known as being Tom Waits.
He was also in Wolfen with Greg Hines.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah, and I'll shout out my favorite with him in it, Down by Law. He's just in jail in that one. It's great. It's just about Tom Waits being in jail with a couple of other weirdos.
Also, from this point on, because we hit most of the real characters, assume everybody here is made up or some sort of composite, unless I say so.
Well, the last one I have on the official list is James Remar as Dutch Schultz. He was in Warriors, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He played the dad in Dexter. He was in Wilfred, Horns, Django Unchained. He did a voice in Ratatouille, and he was in Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Real guy, Dutch Schultz, but he was not nearly as cool as this movie made him out to be. Also, James Remar was kind of a weird choice to play him because I don't know how old James Remar was when he made this, but he looks 50. I know he was younger than that, and Dutch Schultz died at like 32 years old.
That's interesting.
He was 31 when he made this.
He does not look 31.
He does not look 31.
Does not.
That's a rough 31.
That is a 31 who came out the womb smoking 2 packs of fucking Marlboro Reds a day.
Yeah.
That's a 31 that had whiskey in his baby bottle.
I have to throw in an honorable mention because I was flabbergasted when they finally made their on-screen appearance. But Mark Margolis, most easily known, probably in my opinion, as Hector Salamanca from the Breaking Bad series, but he's also been in a bunch of shit, including Requiem for a Dream, Scarface, Ace Ventura: Pet Detective.
Yeah, that's the one I was gonna shout out.
But
I know him from The Wrestler that we are going to review one day.
Coming soon, absolutely. But yes, he has like maybe 45 seconds of screen time, and it's awesome and brutal. So there you go. And that's gonna wrap it for me, unless you guys have some particular folks you want to shout about.
No, I think we hit all the ones I wanted to talk about. It was mostly Tom Waits, Greg Hines, and James Remar.
I mean, I'll shout out Jennifer Grey in one of her first roles. You know her as Baby, the one who is not being put in the corner.
Oh, okay. There's another.
She was Nic Cage's wife in this. She's in the film for 50 seconds.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, she's got like 3 scenes, I think.
She has 2. She has the scene where they meet up in his apartment where like Richard Gere hasn't seen him in a while. It's like, you got married? What are you talking about?
Yeah,
and she shows up.
Oh, and she's like fucking with the cat. Yeah.
Yes. And she shows up like either right before or right after his death. I cannot recall.
Both. She's there on scene when it occurs. But yeah, so that wraps housekeeping. We can dive into the plot, which we should do because there's a lot going on in there. But first, have you guys heard that people are selling stuff that you can buy that may or may not be useful?
Like
I've
goods
heard
and services, perhaps?
Yeah, you exchange money for them.
Oh shit, I wanted a peanut.
So here, listen to some ads real quick.
Money can buy many peanuts.
This is true. So now we can dive into the plot. And
can I dive into what this movie's actually about first? Because I've been dying to just explain this to somebody. I literally told like my coworkers at work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is what it is.
Hell yeah. Lead us in. Lead us into it.
Love talking about gambling. So this movie's about running numbers. For people who don't know, running numbers is the old-timey way of saying the lottery. Now, sorry, hang on.
You mean like Shirley Jackson?
Yes, exactly.
A little good literary reference.
So before there were like state-sanctioned lotteries where you would watch it on the TV and numbers would get blown up into a thing and you're just like, oh, okay, I lost, fucking whatever. Gangsters did that. And they used to do it the same exact way, which was they would just draw numbers out of a hat until people were like, well, how do we know that these are the numbers and you're not just stealing my money? Gangsters, instead of saying fuck you and then shoot him in the head, are just like, shit, you're right, because sometimes gangsters are cool. And they started using racehorses out of the paper. Depending on what state you were in, they would do certain racetracks and they would use the horses that came in first, second, and third. Again, I think it's called first, show, and place. And the last dollar sign, or the last dollar amount, are those are the winning numbers. So first was like paid 187, second paid 53, and third paid 7. Those last digits were your winning numbers. So you could just check the newspaper and see if you won. So Dutch Schultz actually used to manipulate these numbers by betting outrageous amounts to change the numbers at the last second.
All right, so I have the specifics on the horse thing.
Yeah.
So it's win, place, and show. You're right on that.
Okay.
A win means that the horse must win the race overall. A place bet means it must finish first or second, and a show place means it's first, second, or third to win your bet.
Right. But when you're talking about the horses, the one who came in first. The one who came in second, you would say, is the one that showed.
Yes.
And the one who came in third is the one who placed. But you're absolutely right for that terminology. And I'm just going to go on a little bit of a tangent here about this woman, Stephanie St. Clair, who is actually shown in the movie about halfway through when Dutch Schultz is shown trying to take over the numbers racket in Harlem. And you see like 4 or 5 like African American gangsters being like, well, what are we going to do? Well, I guess we'll sell him the numbers. That never happened because Stephanie St. Clair is an absolute badass who should be studied. She was a mob boss, but fucking hated the police like most mob bosses. But instead of just like saying they hate the police, she actually community organized a lot of the Black communities in Harlem, paid for legal defenses, and taught classes on how to essentially question the cops to not get arrested. She never let Dutch Schultz get her numbers game. She did retire. She then married a Black Israelite, which was very weird, but then she killed him, which was pretty cool. And that was her life. And I love her. And I would marry her.
Gotta get you that time machine.
I gotta get a time machine.
No, that's badass. And the rundown of how the numbers worked is very cool. It's the most I've ever learned about horse race gambling and street run lottery rackets.
Oh, one of the funniest things too, just real quick, and then I'll be done with this, is so when like the US government allowed for lotteries, their whole thing was that so when you ran numbers, you would take a certain percentage. That's how you made your money. And it was normally anywhere from 20 to 40%. So the US government undercut them and was taking 15%. And that's so people went over from playing the numbers with them to going over to the United States government. Once a numbers bracket like wasn't really a thing anymore, they jacked it up to 50%.
Well, that's how monopolies work.
Now you mentioned that she married a Black Israelite. I thought it was a Black Nazi. Was the whole reason why it was cool that he got killed? Because I think there are some cool Black Israelites out there.
Yeah. No.
hang on. I am going to. Okay. In the late 1930s, she met her husband. I'm gonna pronounce this wrong, and I'm very sorry. Sufi Abdul Hamid, known as the Black Hitler for his anti-Semitic Nazi fashion of activism.
Yeah, no, fuck that guy.
Hamid was a militant activist and was a leader of an Islamic Buddhist cult. St. Clair and Hamid's
that's
marriage
fucking weird.
Yes.
Islamic Buddhist cult?
Yes.
Huh.
St. Clair and Hamid's marriage went quickly downhill when he allegedly had an affair with a Black fortune teller known as Fu Footnam. The marriage officially ended in January 1938 when St. Clair shot Hamid during a fight over his relationship with Footnam and was sentenced to 2 to 10 years in women's jail.
Do we know how much she actually served?
It looks like anywhere from 2 to 5 because she was released.
Okay.
All it says is released in the early 1940s.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can see that like documentation on that having disappeared.
2 to 10 years for first degree murder is not bad.
And then when she got out of jail, she retired from the numbers racket. She continued to write columns in local newspaper about discrimination, police brutality, illegal search rage, and other issues facing the Black community. So
fuck yeah, she rules.
Cool
Absolutely.
fucking 100%.
Lady. Now, that being said, with the introduction of what this movie is about.
Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Oh my God. I think I may have just found something. I think I may have just stumbled across something. Okay, Bumpy Roads, played by Larry Fishburne. I'm sorry, Lawrence Fishburne, and he's called Larry Fishburne in this fucking movie. I think I may have just stumbled upon who he is based after, which is Stephanie St. Clair's chief enforcer, Bumpy Johnson.
Oh,
who okay. I just looked at this picture. I'm like, he kind of looks like Lawrence Fishburne.
Interesting.
Who refused to pay protection to Schultz.
That tracks. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I'm down with this.
We got there.
There you go. So what the movie is actually about, though, is it's two
trumpets.
No, it's two intertwining love stories.
Dances.
It's two love stories. Come on, guys. Where's your sense of romanticism? It's
not in this movie.
It's about two couples navigating the crime and smooth jazz filled streets of Harlem in the late 1920s into early 1930s. And we're going to get into it. So we open on the titular Cotton Club, And this this movie sets out to have a bit of a commentary on race relations at the time, and it wastes no time doing so. Because our first scene is the Cotton Club and the doorman being racist to a couple and not letting them in.
Yep.
Which I
And
didn't
the doorman's black, by the way.
I know. I didn't even get like I didn't I didn't write down specific dialogue. They're like, yeah, no, you're not allowed in. And she's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you're colored. And she's like, no, I'm from Argentina. He's like, they don't have colored people in Argentina. You're not getting it, basically. That's what he said. So we also get the first meeting, not first meeting, first meeting we see between our two primary characters whose arcs we're going to follow throughout the course of the film, and that is Dixie and Sandman. And Sandman is taking numbers bets at the time from the doorman and Dixie, and he also informs Dixie, who has been on a trip. He is a musician. We also learn later that he's kind of a jack of all trades. He's done a bunch of stuff, but he's been out of town for some time, and he hit the numbers before he left. So he gets a bit of a payoff from Sandman. Despite the fact that we start in front of the Cotton Club, they actually, neither Sandman nor Dixie are trying to get in at this point in time, and they walk off together, and that's where we get the conversation and the payoff. But Dixie is who we follow from here, and he ends up at a different club called Bamville, and he's playing with the musicians at Bamville, and then he ends up getting called over, or he's just chatting with some gentlemen at a table who are unsuccessfully trying to hit on some women at this time. But Dixie, with his young Richard Gere and funny looking glasses, good looks.
Great mustache, too. Great mustache.
Great
All
mustache.
the facial hair in this is excellent.
Yeah, the great thin mustache.
I loved his glasses in the first couple of scenes, and then they have him ditch him for the rest of the movie, which I thought was a mistake, personally.
Yeah.
Well, I like how they gave him and Nic Cage identical mustaches to signify that they are indeed brothers.
Yeah, it looks like they were penciled in.
Well, yeah, they look like what? Why can't I think of that director's name? Something Waters. John Waters.
Oh, John Waters. Yes.
I knew I'd get there.
The Pope of Filth.
Yes.
If you picture his mustache, that is the mustache they had.
I picture his mustache in my dreams every night.
It's the quintessential pencil mustache.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
Because he's rocked it long after it fell out of vogue. But anyway, so Dixie helps facilitate these young ladies coming over to this table of gentlemen who turn out to be gangsters. We're introduced to this concept because two police officers walk into the club, and everybody sort of like takes note that the fuzz is around, but they do something either really out of line or really in line, depending on your opinion of police officers in the film, in that they light a stick of dynamite and throw it under the table that Dixie, the gangsters, and the young women are occupying.
Okay, so hang on real quick, because maybe your copy didn't have this scene, but there is a very quick throwaway scene where you see an opposing gangster pull these two guys aside and say, you have the uniforms, right? Okay, just throw the dynamite right under the table and get out of there. So they were not real. They were not real cops.
Yeah, no. I was gonna get to that, but that scene,
sorry.
No, that scene where they give them like the instruction is cut out of the version that I watched. Which I'm not gonna lie, if that was one of the things I missed, I'm kind of in favor of its cutting, because you put it together as the viewer. But anyway, they light a stick of dynamite, they throw it underneath the table. Dixie reacts quickly and grabs the guy next to him and pulls him away from the table. So the person he pulls away from the table ends up being Dutch Schultz. Other gentlemen that he's with proceed to open fire on the cops as they flee the club. And I have to admit, the one thing, one of my primary criticisms of this scene is that the dynamite explosion is incredibly underwhelming.
Yeah,
it flips a table. That's not dynamite.
Yeah. Also, nobody dies, I don't think.
Correct, but it's talked about later. And when you guys were telling me about different versions and different scenes, I thought this was something that they were going to have been referring to, because later when people are talking about the quote unquote bombing, they're talking about like somebody getting their arm blown off,
which we don't see at all.
Correct.
Okay, correct. So I do find that kind of interesting, because I thought perhaps it was meant to demonstrate how, something relatively significant. I mean, somebody trying to assassinate some mobsters, but it getting sort of blown up, forgive the pun, in the telling. Like there was a bombing in a club, and then somebody adds that somebody got their arm blown off, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, after this event, Dixie walks Vera back to her room, and she is shit-faced. I believe this is the first time they sleep together in the film. I can't remember if it's just heavily implied and later confirmed, or if it's basically confirmed in the scene itself. But then we cut away from Dixie to his fellow protagonist, Sandman. And Sandman is having breakfast with his family in the morning, and everybody's asking him about the bombing at Bamville. This is where we start to hear the sort of exaggerated tales. And then we get a couple of other scenes. There's a lot of intercut scenes in this film, but basically the word about Dixie saving Dutch from the bombing is spreading. One of the indications we get of this is Dixie's brother Vincent mentioning that people are talking about it, and also sort of like pressuring Dixie to get them a job with Dutch, and Dixie kind of not taking it super seriously, right?
Right.
So Dixie and Vincent go back to where their mother lives, where Vincent and his new wife also live. And Dixie's mom it's funny, it's referred to a couple of times in the film, but we never got like a definitive backstory. She is oddly plugged in to like the local scene from whatever her past was, right? So she chides Dixie a little bit for saving Dutch because, quote, Dutch is a bad guy. But other than that, like that's the main thing we get from the scene. Dixie's brother's gotten married since the last time he saw him. They live with his mother, and his mother is at least aware of who Dutch Schultz is. Sandman and his brother, who are tap dancers, get picked up as an act for the Cotton Club. But we also start the sort of conflict between Sandman and one of like the stage managers at the Cotton Club, who is racist and mean for no good reason, basically.
Now, and we also missed, there was I don't know if it's in your version, because I feel like it's a scene they could have cut, because there's like a 2-minute long, like kind of a dance breakdown in the kitchen with Sandman and his family. That's actually very good.
Oh yeah, where like his like sister or niece or something is dancing, and then he's like, "You're dragging your feet," and he shows her how to do it.
Yeah, it's very good. It's kind of endearing.
So I just stumbled on a piece of weird information about the production of this movie. One of the producers was murdered. Murdered. And it's very possibly because of their association with this film. At the Cotton Club's film financing was being arranged, the 33-year-old Roy Radin, the guy who was murdered, he was killed. He vanished en route to a scheduled Beverly Hills conference in '83 and was reported missing days later by his personal assistants. His remains were found a few weeks later by a beekeeper about 65 miles north of Los Angeles. And the theory on what happened was that Karen Greenberger, who was another producer, was convicted of second-degree murder and kidnapping because she was angry about being cut from a producer's role in this film.
There's more to this than that.
Yeah, no, there's like Robert Evans was a person of interest.
The killers later alleged they had been hired by Evans and Radin's girlfriend, Karen Greenberger, a drug dealer. You already said that. The 1989 Cotton Club trial, Evans invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and refused to testify.
Well, that's just smart.
Yeah.
Let's just be clear, that's not an indication of guilt.
Yeah, I was trying to find version differences between the two cuts, and I stumble on that.
So Damn.
Oh my god, this is great.
Yeah,
This movie has
fascinating.
just the movie. It's like, all right, they did this fucking show on Paramount about the making of The Godfather. I want a movie about the making of the Cotton Club at this
To
point.
be fair, I think there is a movie about the murder you guys are talking about.
Okay.
Oh, I'm gonna look this the fuck up because I'm gonna watch this like
There's a
literally
Law and Order
tonight.
episode based on the murder.
Yeah, but Law and Order sucks. We all know that.
I might be wrong. I'm not sure.
Oh, I will find it if it exists.
Yeah, definitely let me know.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I thought that they might have made a movie about that because I had seen in my research for the Cotton Club, they had Killing Hollywood, the Cotton Club murder. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a podcast series, but it has nothing to do with what you guys just said.
Gotcha.
No, this series is based on the murder of Roy Raiden.
Nope. I'm sorry. You are correct. It is a podcast about the murder.
Yeah,
I'm
starring Juliette Lewis, Rainn Wilson, and Christian Slater.
What? Okay.
All right. It came out like 2 years ago.
Oh, because it's not like three dudes talking. It's like one of those old time radio shows where each person plays somebody. Like Juliette Lewis plays Leanne Jacobs, Christian Slater is Bob Evans, Rainn Wilson is Roy Raiden.
Intriguing.
Fascinating.
Fucking go figure. So
and I don't know if we mentioned it, but apparently the murder weapon was a stick of dynamite.
Sick.
That's such
awesome.
a wild murder weapon. I'm sorry.
Yes. That's like some fucking Dick Dastardly shit.
So Sandman and his brother get picked up as an act for the Cotton Club. Dixie is also sort of not ambushed, but approached while he's playing a show by a character referred to as the Golem. We actually don't get this nomenclature until later in the film, but he basically says Dutch wants you to come play a private party and we'll pay you 150 bucks for it. And so he goes, and like this, the scene of him being taken to this party is like vaguely threatening. But when he shows up, it seems like a fancy house or hotel party.
Fancy, how do you do?
Yeah.
A box social.
Yeah.
And I guess this is where we find out he plays a lot of instruments because we've already established he's like this tremendous trumpet player.
Cornet. It's a cornet.
Oh, whatever. It's a fucking horn.
It is.
Do they use it in ska? That it's not as good as a trumpet.
Correct.
And apparently he's also a very, very good piano player.
Yes.
And I actually wanted to look this up because the way that Richard Gere was actually hitting the keys made sense. So I was just like, is Richard Gere like a super talented piano player too? And he's not. Which made me sad.
A little bit of movie magic.
He probably had some coaching or something.
So
like roughly where he should be.
So because I kind of look after there was like an episode of Peacekeeper with John Cena where he played the piano. And I was like, this is pretty good. I looked up, I was like, oh, John Cena was like a concert pianist growing up, which is wild.
That's awesome. That's so good.
that is weird. That's also like when I stumbled down a whole rabbit hole learning that like Andrew WK was like a music prodigy who was at like Juilliard when he was in his early teens and shit.
But also might not be Andrew WK because of weirdness.
I heard about that as well. But you know what I haven't heard about in a little bit?
Damn it. You know who isn't Andrew WK?
Products and advertisements. So listen to some of these.
I also cannot prove that Andrew WK is not advertising on this podcast.
Yeah, you never know.
When it's time to party, we will party hard. Dun, 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 dun.
I saw Andrew WK in the tiniest fucking bar in Atlantic City.
We all were at that show.
We all were at that show. Shit.
We did not see each other. I was at that show.
I don't know how that's possible because that room is like fucking 20 feet wide and 50 feet long.
Wait, what was the venue again?
It was the Boneyard, which no longer exists.
Wait, Josh, were you at that show?
I can neither confirm nor deny if I was at that show.
Okay.
I know my high school history teacher was because I saw her there. What's up, Miss Stevens?
Nice.
I see her at ska shows all the time.
Miss Stevens, friend of the pod.
Hell
There
yeah.
you go. Yeah, so Dixie shows up at this private party. Dutch basically informs him he's got a special lady friend coming, and she likes singing, and she's gonna bring her own music. And can he play the piano? And
Can he read music? Is
Basically,
Yeah,
bit,
yeah. He's basically saying, "Can you sight read?"
yeah,
Which
so
is a pain in the ass, and I refuse to do it.
was his also Gear's line was pretty slick coming back with this. He's like, I read it, I write it, and I play it, baby.
Yeah.
He is pretty smooth in this, and I'm not
He-
usually a big Richard Gere guy.
Yeah,
not a gearhead.
I see. I'm an early gearhead. Give me like pre 1992 gear. I'm in.
Give me this and Primal Fear, and that's about
yeah,
it.
yeah.
All right, that's fair.
Those two alone, I'll give them credit where credit is due.
Again, I just love me some Pretty Woman, but
Yeah,
I digress.
That's fair. That's fair.
I mean, it's just My Fair Lady, but with who airs?
So, turns out Dutch's special lady friend is Vera, which sort of sets off a bit of running through the course of the film consternation between Dixie and Vera, and Dutch, as
yes.
a result. So we also get a little bit of a mob story development here. So the party is not necessarily ancillary, but is a catalyst for a truce between Dutch, who they call the Dutchman, and I go back and forth in my notes and referring to him as such.
And so does the movie.
Yeah, and the Flynn brothers, who are detailed, or rather mentioned briefly in response to the dynamiting at Bamville. But Oni Madden has brokered this meeting to secure a truce. Despite some tempers and egos sort of conflicting at the negotiation table, Flynn and Dutch agree to set aside their differences and stop blowing up places. So Vera also, in one of her conversations with Dutch, who promises to help her with anything, mentions that she wants to own a club of her own one day. This is important later. But my favorite bit from this particular scene, because it is out of fucking nowhere, they have a buffet. They have a nice fucking spread, right? And so the gangsters are in first, and Dixie and Vera, as honored guests, get let into the room next, but nobody else is. And Flynn says something offensive. He's using a bunch of racial slurs at the point. I'm not sure what about it sets off Dutch, but Dutch takes a fucking carving knife and stabs Flynn through the throat with it.
It's because
It rules.
Dutch.
I loved it.
If you couldn't tell by his last name, Dutch was Jewish.
Gotcha.
I don't know if this would have been enough to set him off, especially like this, because
I mean, he was already going at his throat in the truce scene. Like, they didn't want to shake hands. Bob
Yeah.
Oni's like forcing them to shake hands. So there's
right,
already
but
this
I mean, like
air of animosity.
in mob sense, though, he's essentially just hit another boss. And on top of that, Schultz was, I believe, a ancillary member of the five families. Like, he didn't run a family, nor was he a part of it, but he was kind of in that group.
Jewish.
Right, but he was like in that grouping.
Yeah. But yeah, the scene with the throat stabbing is brutal. Dutch knocks him into a table and continues to stab him. And at this point, Oni Madden's muscle, Frenchie.
Oh, I love Frenchie.
Frenchie's so good.
Great.
He's
very good
terrifying.
character.
He's terrifying, but he's my favorite character in the whole movie.
He is an awesome character, but he scares me.
It's also great just because it's the same guy who plays the judge in My Cousin Vinny.
Yes.
Correct.
The scene with the watch towards the end is my favorite scene of this.
It's an amazing.
Yes,
scene.
We'll get, because it is one of my favorite scenes as well.
I agree
Frenchie's
entirely.
so good.
But yeah, no. So Frenchie holds a gun to Dutch's head, and they basically get kicked out because gangland assassinations aside, he's also murdered somebody in the presence of like Oni Madden. So now Madden's shit is complicated by his proximity to this crime with a bunch of basically civilian witnesses. Is not good in organized crime terms.
Right, because he was probably hired, given money to broker a deal between these two, so that like
He got a
cops
finder's
can.
fee at least.
He was probably hired because when you do something like that, it's a bunch of other families saying you got to cool this down because there's too many bodies and cops are now getting involved. So he was probably paid a decent sum to broker this, and now it was just all fucked up by Dutch.
Yeah. Also, Dutch was a former underling of Oni's before he struck out on his own to some extent. It's mentioned in the movie, but it's not expanded on.
Right.
That makes sense. Getting a semi-neutral third party that kind of knows the players involved to try and facilitate a ceasefire. But basically, they're bounced out of the party, and Dutch and Dixie and Vera are in a car, and Dutch he's portrayed throughout the entirety of this film, obviously, with this kind of start as like a paranoid psychotic. And so when Dutch gets dropped off, he's basically like, both of you don't go anywhere in the next few weeks. I want to know where you are because I might need you. And Dixie is a little bit shaken up by this gratuitous violence that he had a front row seat to. But he drops Vera off, who invites him upstairs, and he's like, no. the dude that you're now like hanging out with, are a mistress for, just stabbed a dude in the throat in front of all of us. I have no interest in putting a target on my back.
Yeah.
Which is smart.
Smart move.
Yeah, it's a level of intelligence rarely displayed by protagonists with a romantic interest in a film. So good on you, Dixie. At this point, Dixie takes his mother to the Cotton Club along with his brother Vincent and Vincent's wife.
In a very heartwarming scene, too. I really enjoyed this.
So this is the part where I found Dixie and Vincent's mom to be a very intriguing character despite her low amount of screen time, because this is what I was talking about earlier. Dixie's mom fucking recognizes Oni Madden and goes over to say hi.
That's because she was a dancer, and Oni Madden used to finance Broadway shows. Was like the actual backstory on that, which is fascinating.
Sure, but like she knew a bunch of players. Like like Dixie's mom was fucking plugged into the streets, man. Like she kept tabs on that shit. So she goes over to say hi to Oni Madden, uses his first name after getting his attention. And then at typical mom fashion, it's like, oh, you should hire my son. He's very, very talented. Not realizing they have some level of association at this point. And Oni actually has an aside with Dixie at this point where he's like, look, you got to be careful who you play piano for. But, come talk to me sometime. So it's interesting. It's an interesting interaction. We get a cut back to Sandman, who's watching one of the stage shows, and there's clearly a woman that he has his eye on. This is actually a very interesting scene and something I definitely wanted to mention, because I don't know if it was just a natural affinity for it or if Coppola just desperately wanted to film stage shows. But almost every time there is a stage show in this movie, it is shot impeccably.
Yes, with a loving touch.
I like
Tarantino's feet.
Exactly. Yeah. That is exactly the thought I had in my head. Like Tarantino just wants to film women's feet, and Coppola seems like he just wants to film stage shows. That is the level of attention and passion that I got.
All right, I got to look up the cinematographer and see what else they did. Give me a minute.
Okay.
See if maybe like he picked the right man for the job for this. Maybe
it's possible, but while you're looking that up, I want to describe the scene. So there is a woman not singing so much as vocalizing through a lot of the performance, and there's two dancers And even though, again, I'm almost positive it's all vocalizing and not actual lyrics, you get an entire sense of a story from what's going on. It's like lovers, but they're kept
that was all
apart.
vocalizing. It was great.
It was really cool, and it was shot really well, and you got a whole sense of a story without a whole lot of context to it. And all of that is juxtaposed over Sandman staring from off stage longingly at the woman dancer in the stage act. He also gets yelled at again by the backstage manager, who he definitely has some conflict with. So we learn later that the dancer that Sandman's infatuated with, her name is Lila. And I don't know how much history they have together, because when I first saw scenes where they interacted after this, I thought he was just shooting his shot. But it looks like they're at least acquainted the further I got into it. So I'm not 100% sure, but it's a great scene. And like I said, impeccably shot, like almost all of the stage acts in this film are.
Yeah.
And so I can't seem to find any evidence that this cinematographer, Stephen Goldblatt, has done a lot of stage filming, with the exception of a couple of Styx concerts.
Huh.
But he did do the cinematography for Joe versus the Volcano and Batman Forever. So there's that.
There is that.
I mean, it might just be
Weapon.
Coppola.
Look at that. It might just be Coppola. I think
Yeah,
you're right.
because I mean, Coppola is kind of known for being extremely hands-on.
So shoot, I had a thought and I just lost it. Give me a second.
Your train of thought
that's right.
derailed.
No. I just wanted to call out this scene specifically, primarily because, again, the way it was shot stood out to me, but also there is no fat on this scene, despite the fact that you're watching a stage show that is disconnected from the overall story. It is intriguing, interesting, gives you, again, a mini story unfolding in the act itself, but also you get information on Sandman's romantic interest and reinforces the antagonistic relationship he has with the stage manager at the club.
You catch that stage manager's name? I was trying to pin him for what act, like where I know him from, but I wasn't able to.
No, I did not.
Okay, yeah,
I didn't either. It might be one of those nameless people they just gave a name to.
I honestly thought it was the guy who plays Tom in Office Space at first. But like that doesn't make sense, because that guy didn't start acting for another like 3 or 4 years.
But yeah, so great scene, one of my favorites actually in the film. So Dutch actually shows up at the Cotton Club at this point with Vera, and he attempts to talk to Dixie, who declines, primarily because he's with his family. So now's not the time to talk any sort of business or basically anything Dutch is involved with, right?
Yeah.
And then at this point, Sandman and his brother go on stage to perform their tap dancing routine. Dutch dances with his wife and runs into Dixie on the dance floor with his mom. And they have sort of like an over-the-shoulders conversation where Dutch says he wants Dixie's help. He pitches it as primarily like a fashion consultant, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
And offers him $200 a week.
That's walking around money in 1930 something.
I think that's a down payment on a house.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a house that Sears ships you and you build yourself, but
time
still.
to check the old inflation calculator.
Okay, quick aside about those Sears houses. So you know that there's all those fucking dickheads who are like, houses are built like shit nowadays. Those old Sears houses, most of them are fucking dust now, because the people that actually did the build it yourself thing didn't know dick about putting a house together.
Buy your own full-sized house model seems horrifying. I can't believe more people didn't die in collapses. But the only reason why I even know they were a thing is I'm a big Michael Shannon fan, and his character in Boardwalk Empire buys and tries to put together a Sears house.
Okay.
And it's a running bit from his wife, who hates him, constantly talking about how shit it is.
Yeah.
Yo, $200. And I'm guessing 1927, because they do a time jump from the Roaring Twenties to the Great Depression.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna put 1927. $200 today. In that time, $3,495.71.
That's every week.
Yeah,
I would take that. today. Giving fashion advice to a mob guy. I would do that in a heartbeat.
For $3,500 a week. I'd be working overtime for them.
Wait, real quick. Punch in 300 a week, because as soon as they get outside, Dutch is like, I'll give you 300 a week. And Dixie's like, inside you said 200. And he's like, yeah, well, whatever. I don't fucking pay attention to what I say.
I mean, it should be like 4,500.
$5,243.57.
That's fucking insane.
That's a lot of cheddar.
Also, so you can kind of see like the inflation calculator. So it's like it starts in 1927, 300. It actually, money gets more expensive in like the 40s and then the 50s. So it basically plateaus up until 1979-ish. 1979 is when you kind of have this steep, sharp rise that never stops. It's like, wonder what happened in 1979.
When did Reagan fuck up taxes?
1980, baby.
I couldn't place it on the timeline, but what you were saying, I was like, this sounds suspicious. I feel like we could tie it.
The line is basically plateaued. It goes up. It's going up a little bit, but from 1927 to 1970, let's go 1970. It only went from 300 to 679. From 1970 to now is when it jumped up to $5,000.
Jesus.
Amazing.
Money is fake and made up.
I think that is a good point to cut it. When we come back, guys, hold me to this in case I don't remember. We have to pick up the thread of Sandman's romantic interest. Again, I think those two love stories are the driving factors behind this entire film. And the gambling and gangster shit is just to keep Rich interested.
Yes, absolutely. It's niche, but it worked for me.
All right, so that's where we'll pick up on our next episode. While you're waiting for that, please give us a follow on social media. You can find us on Twitter at cagefight_pod.
You can also find us at patreon.com/NicCageFight. $3 a month gets you every single episode without ads. So drop us those coins, because when we get to 10 people, Ryan has to speed run G-Force.
I'm gonna do it. I'll do it. I'll learn it. I'll fucking submit it for next year's GDQ, goddammit.
I want to see that so bad.
It's gonna be during the awful games block, so
yeah, I couldn't see another category that you would qualify for with that one. But yeah, nope, fantastic. Like I said, follow us, consider subscribing on Patreon. It's a hell of a deal. And until next time, listener, as always, we appreciate you.